I am right, I am from Denmark, so I would have to go select Danish because of some of the currencies and the decimal points. But other than that, there's not a lot you have to answer when you load up your data. You will get to this screen, and people that know process mining is probably familiar with this kind of screen. If you're not, there's really only three things we need to ask you to get started with process mining. It's the case ID, activity, and activity time. The case ID could be the ticket ID. It could be a purchase order ID, a purchase order line ID. It could be the opportunity ID in your sales to lead to cash process. So it is really the idea of whatever you're trying to look at, what process you're trying to look at. The other thing is fairly simple. It's activity names of what are you doing in the case. This is a service ticket. You create a new case, you assign it to a user, you escalate it, you resolve it, and so forth. And for all of those steps, we do need dates or dates and times for those steps. So if you can get those three things, we can actually do process mining for you. That's really all we need. Everything else we're showing to the right is bonus, right? That's benefit and it's extra and it gives us extra ability to do analysis. One of them is resource. It's sitting here in the optional bucket. Resource is typically the person dealing with activity. It could also be a machine. It could be other things that are carrying out the activity. We create our logs so they start with these names, which means it's easier for us to find. We'll find a bunch of names that are commonly used for case IDs and activities. If we don't, all you have to do is drag these things on top of the cases. If you drag it to the wrong one, you can drag it back to the other one. And we won't let you proceed until you give us these three things. The only other thing you'd probably need to do on this screen is there's very often you will get resource names, for instance, in here in the log like I have. And typically we don't want to call Peter out if we're doing large presentation. There's privacy concerns. We've built in an anonymization. So if you click this, get a small warning, and then now all your resources are changed to anonymized names, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And you can do that for all your columns. So there's really typically not a lot for you to do except just drag a couple of columns onto your CSV file, and then we will load up the rest. If you notice, we automatically detected the format of your date and time, so you don't have to specify that for us either. So it said, congratulations, everything worked. You will get an error on that screen if there's anything in your CSV file you haven't put in properly, and we'll tell you the rows of where the problems are. And then this is where you now land. Now you get into mindzie Studio. We've loaded up your data set, and then we've added a couple of our what we call templates here. These are templates analysis in an investigation that we've created for you. The first screen is very useful to begin with. It shows very standard process information on how many cases do you have. Here we have about 10,000. The average case duration is always something that's a good note to take down. How long does our cases take on average? And we have about 12 different steps we go through in this process. So let's look at some of the other templates. I'll skip Data Explorer and get back to it. But so long running cases is always interest, right? The performance of your cases, how long does it take? And here we've created a template for anything that takes over 30 days, we consider a long. And then here you can show a histogram of all your cases. I mean, you can click on one of them and see the data behind that length of case if you want. And on the right side here, we have our root cause analysis that's been added. And that will basically show you that if you de-escalate a case, apparently in this service ticket, there's a 68% chance of the case running long. So de-escalation would probably be something we'd want to look into in this process. Resource 5 and resource 8, there's also 65 and 64%, almost twice as likely, to be long-running cases if these two resources are involved. Lots of reason for that. They could be slow. They could also just be that they are the one handling the difficult cases. So this is, again, you didn't have to do anything to get these insights. Here's bottlenecks in our process. And we call them duration between main process steps. And the reason for that is we take out the process steps that don't happen a lot, basically filter out some noise for you. And then we show the rest. And the more red it is, basically the longer this step will take. So here it's from send to engineering response is taking 5 days. And that quickly shows us, so it's a 5-day on a 41-day case average. Doesn't seem like it's the main problem in this process. Right? You can see some of the other ones. Here's 4 days, You add them up, it obviously takes time, but it doesn't seem like one bottleneck is causing the majority of the time in our process. Let's go look at some more of what else there is. There's repetition, so loops and rework. And in here, it's showing us automatically that 64% of your cases have repetitions. So that's this many cases. And then we put some root cause analysis on. Because all the data is a little bit different, we try to do root cause on multiple things. I don't personally like that much on the weekday. So let me just go show you if we wanted to take something out, I can just go remove the day of the week here. And then I can go back and look at my root cause. It's automatically calculated. And now it says repetitions are likely caused by these two resources, right? 4 and 8 have 97% likelihood of actually doing repetitions. Repetitions are not welcome for a lot of reasons. And then you could, again, just go and figure out why is this happening to resource 4 and resource 8. If we look at the repeated activities themselves, if you look at repetition, so again, loops in your process or rework in your process. So if you do something more than once, it's typically a problem. And it's very easy to see here, if you send something more than once to a customer, we actually add 56 days to the total case time. That makes sense because we send something to the customer that could take a while for the customer to respond, right? Maybe hard for us to do anything about. Same thing, whenever we send to engineering multiple times, it even though it only took 5 days for them to respond, it actually adds 52 days to our overall process when you repeatedly send something to engineering. So I'd imagine in this process, it's because it's a complicated task. It comes back from engineering, you got to go talk to the customer or so forth. One of them I found interesting actually here is that when you reassign a case multiple times, right? It doesn't really say anything else you're doing. You're just reassigning it to more than one person. So the case is bouncing around. That almost adds a month to your case, right? So reassigning is definitely something this company should probably look at doing and seeing if they get rid of trying to do a reassigning. So let's try to do something else. It looks like resources definitely an issue in this case, right? Resources plays a big role on the time on these cases. So we can go in here and say, these are the things we do as default. Just out of the box, we always put on your analysis because we find that most of the times they're relevant. You can go and remove them. You can go and delete any of them right here and just remove this analysis again. You can also add new ones. And you can add them from our template library that we continuously update as well. But these are the ones that come. And one of them I'm interested in is the performance. So here's a performance by the first resource. That's typically the person that opens the case. And we know who that is. It's pretty easy for us to figure out. And here you can see the times it takes for these different resources. And it's fairly clear here to show that 5 takes quite a bit of time, and so does 8, right? And if you remember, if we go back to the long case durations, those were the 2 we actually pointed out here in the root cause, right? So we told you already here, but it doesn't show you here the length, right? Here it just shows it's a problem. Here we can actually see how long they actually took, that this was 55 days on average versus some of the better ones that were 30 days. What we show as well, the bubbles are the number of cases they do. So the bigger bubble on the right is really your problem, right? So fairly simple without a lot of clicks. You can get information about your cases, and then we'll show you how to build some of these from scratch. So let me try to move on to the next process that I have that I wanted to show, and this is now lead to cash. So lead to cash is taking it all the way from an opportunity in the sales process all the way to the hopeful close of an order or a cancellation of a sales order. And here we're actually going from, I won't spend much time here, but we're going from Salesforce that takes care of all the sales process itself. And then NetSuite takes over to handle all of the billing and all of the process of getting your money afterwards. So let's try a different approach on this one, right? We could go through the templates again and do the same thing we did before, but let's go in and actually look at this thing called the Data Explorer. This is really just an empty analysis that we put on your task list because it shows up with our Explorer view. And if you look down on the right here, we have 3 views. We have Explorer view, we have Dashboard view, and we have Notebook view. And I'll show you the Notebook view later as well. And we use them for different things that what we want to kind of find out in the process. If you look at it here, On the right side, we're showing you all the different variants, how you can go through the case, right? If you look at 9% of the cases go through this variance, which means the same steps. Starts with opportunity, you set the amount. You can see this is in Salesforce. You close the date, you set the close date. Now you create a sales order, confirm the sales order, ship date, create invoice, send invoice line, and clear invoice. So that's a typical approach. This is a good scenario. It goes through the normal sales order process. If you take and say, let's just take the 20 top ways that we normally do these sales cases, right? Gets a little bit more complicated, but 20 is still manageable. We can show you all of them. Typically, it's not what you want to do. You want to look at a section of it at a time. And if we try to zoom in on this map and show you what's actually happening in this, you can use this as an exploratory tool to get started. If you don't know the process that well, if you do, if you have the business owner, you can do it together. And then you can figure out what's happening. So some of the things that you will see on this is, I know that I remember this customer actually, one of the things they wanted to do is always have prospecting, right? Makes sense in a sales perspective to prospect and make sure your clients have the money and they have the will to buy something. So here you can see there's a loop that goes around the prospect. Most of the time this goes through, but in 25% of the cases, we actually loop around the prospecting. So mental note, that's something we should look at. If you kind of scroll further down the map, and there's lots of different things to look at, I can see here immediately on this process, and let me zoom it in so you guys can see it. Here's 180 times this activity is looped, right? Which means they're booking multiple times, which I find like, why would you do that? Why would you book an order multiple times, right? It means that it's actually ready to be, this means you won the order. The other thing is that if you go further down, there's a couple of things that are happening. Here you can see it loops out to the side. Here they update the sales order, not preferable. Put a credit hold on it, not something you want to do. And down here, you reject the sales order. That's definitely not something you want to do. And that's happening 42% of the cases. So another mental note, let's look at this, right? So you're using the process map here to just kind of get an idea of what's going on in your process and try to figure out, where do I need to dive deeper, right? What do I need to do? And let's try to now just dive deeper and see how can we do some of that stuff, right? What's the best way to do that? And the way mindzie likes to do this is we like to ask some questions, because we find, my background is AI. We could write a bunch of AI to do this, but it is much easier problem to just ask a few business questions that are simple to answer. They're not difficult questions. And we do that in something we call log enrichment. So when you notice your name got uploaded, we added this enrich to it. And that means we can take the data that you give us and just add a couple of attributes to enrich the experience of analyzing it. Very simple. Machine learning does this a lot with adding variables calculations. And we find it a huge benefit in process mining as well. So we have some built-in things we can go ask you. And these are the different categories of enrichments we can do. Fortunately, we can't go through all of them, so let's try some of the most important. One of them is conformance. And we had something on our process map that were just undesired, right? We have undesired activity happening, and currently we're setting it to a low severity because it's not like it should never happen, but we just prefer this not to happen, right? We don't want rejected sales orders. We don't want credit holes. We don't want update invoice lines, update sales orders. So let's just pick some of those, right? We don't want these things to happen. The other thing we can also do is let's go and look at the wrong order of things are happening in. Again, we want it here, we want it always to have a, we don't want a sales order created in NetSuite before there's actually an opportunity created in Salesforce. Process the customer wanted, and it does make sense, right? So the create opportunity should never happen after you create a sales order. And we can say that this is, we can give this a name also, right? So we can call it didn't create opportunity, if I can spell. Oops. This is my Danish root coming in here. There we go. And this we set to high. This should pretty much never happen. This is a process the company wants you to follow. So we set this to high. Let's look at one other thing we do in enrichment. There's a lots of stuff we can do to add. We can calculate different columns. We can remove data and do a lot of things. But our performance wizard is very often used. And what we do is we go in and look at pairs of how long things take. Because we don't have a lot of time, let me take out a lot of these and just show you what this does. So in case duration, we've said how long does cases normally take. And we try to divide it into buckets, right? Because if we do this, it's easier to analyze. Let me show you my fast and my slow processes and name them so I can now easily do breakdowns and show analysis on it. So let's just say that this could be 200. You can go and change this. And you can also say, I want to change this to what I want. And that way I can analyze what is not happening that way. So here we're basically saying that if it takes this long, 2 years would probably be way too long for us to have. And oh, I forgot one thing on the performance wizard. You can also go in and add any parts of the process where you can say from I create an opportunity in Salesforce till I actually have a sales order created in the NetSuite. How long does that take? And then you can go in, same thing there. You can go in and say, what should this be? Right. So this is what we do. It doesn't take long to do this. And this way you have now some measurements to go after. And we would always ask this in any process starting out. Once we do this and we hit this calculate button, it recalculates some values for you. And now you will see these are all your attributes you have in your currently in your log. And we've added a bunch of things in the bottom. So for instance, in conformance, we have something now called conformance variance. And you can see all the things we marked, how often they're happening. So 703 have no issues cases. There's rejected sales order. This seems high, right? And then we have credit holes happening. So you can see what's happening in the different cases and do some statistics on it. So we find this very helpful. There's also an activity wizard you can do where you can put in estimated cost for your different activities. You don't always have this in your data. You don't always have the time it takes to take these, but you very often know the estimated cost or the estimated time. If you add these in, we'll be able to use this in analysis as well. Let's go and actually so use some of this data. And when I jump back now to the process map, the first thing you hopefully notice is now the color in different places. We like color because it's easy to see, right? So if you look at the process map again, and let's say you're not knowledgeable, you can quickly see what shouldn't happen in this process. You can also see out here to the right, these are the variants that shouldn't be happening, right? So we don't want this because this down at the bottom was the rejected sales order. You can scroll down and you can find the red ones and saying, I can't remember what that was because it's not showing up on the map, but I can go click on this and saying, this was because you didn't create an opportunity first. Can't show that on the map because you didn't do something. But it means it's very easy to see the different problems that are happening in the data. So to actually start using some of this stuff, right? We would want to go and actually figure out, remember some of the problems I mentioned. Let's go back to where we started of just having the top 20, right? We go down and show the top 20, and we wanted to just quickly find out all the things that don't go through prospecting, right? That was one of our problems we want to look at. I can do that by clicking on it very simply and just saying, show me everything that does not have this. These are all the things you can do easily in your process map. And when that does, it just adds a filter over here saying, show me out the data that where prospect is not there. And if you look at it now, the data you're seeing, it's not in there. Right? So it's very easy to get a filter up and running, and you can remove the filter again if you do it wrong. You can filter on edges and on activities and fairly quickly get to the result you want. Once you've done this, now you go into, this is kind of, again, exploring your view. Some of the things I didn't show is you can also go look at your DNA, which is all the different ways that this process can happen. And you can even go in and drill down and look at the individual cases and open up a case at a time. So this is where you explore everything. You go look around and see what the problems could be. Now we've drilled down into saying prospecting is a problem. We have 396 cases. Let's go into our notebook view, which is mindzie Studio is based on Jupyter Notebooks kind of idea, and it's called exploratory data analysis, where you can go and look for things and you can kind of build up these building blocks. And that's where the Lego comes in that Daniel mentioned. We just don't do it with code. We do it all like you don't need to write a single line of code to do any of this. So here's our problem. Let's just try to guess. It could be the resource, right? We could just go guess at this and saying, it could be the first person that created the case is the problem, right? That could be the issue. And here we see it is that resource one is doing a lot of these cases. One of the things this doesn't show us really in this place is how many things does resource one actually do. Because these are blocks and they kind of are built in order, you could say, okay, let's figure out how many things resource one actually does without that filter we added on. So now we're showing all the cases we have in our data, and we can still see here resource one is doing a lot of stuff. So the reason they have a lot of the problem is could be that they're just doing a lot more cases than others. So we have another calculator that makes things easy, and we call it our root cause calculator. And if you add this in, you can fairly quickly say, so this was, what were we doing again here now on the, this was no prospecting, right? So you just tell it that this is the outcome that we want, and then you can go and start adding some fields. We could add this, we could add the first resource. We could say maybe this is the customer that's the problem. And we could just ask it the question instead of trying to guess at it ourselves, right? That's what the root cause analysis does. Say these are the things we want to look at, and it will come up and now in fairly English tell you the problem. And here, resource one is the problem that happens the most, but also it's 82% of the cases resource one does has no prospecting. So there are lots of reasons for that. It could be that they aren't trained properly. They go through the wrong process. We can also see the customer 13 is not prospected. So which is over half of the cases. So this shows it fairly quickly. I see we're running close on time here, but I should be good, I think, for. The other thing was to do is the rejected sales order, right? So we can go back to our Explorer view, and let's just create a new analysis and saying, so this would be rejected, right? Sales order. Let's go and figure out why the sales orders were rejected. And again, here we don't even need to go to the top 20. Rejected sales order is sitting right here. We can just say show everything that has this in it, right? Everything with rejected sales order we now want to look at. And then we can go back into the notebook view and we can do another root cause. We can also cheat a little bit because we can go back up here where we just did the root cause. And even though it's a few clicks, it is a few clicks. So you can go up here and you can just take this block, you can copy it. We can go into the rejected sales order and we just paste it in here. And now all the steps we have to do is pretty much done for us. The only thing we might want to do if we wanted to clean it up is just go say this is rejected sales order. This is more of a, so it means it's a lot less step why you can take our blocks and you can copy them between investigations, between data sets, and they will figure things out and they will put the right things in order for you when you paste it back in. You can see the resource here is the problem, is a resource. This person is involved a lot. It's not the most cases, but whenever a resource 127, it's 73% chance of rejected sales order. Pro salespeople would probably figure out what's happening with these resources, right? Do they need more do they need more help, or is it a problem with training? So one more we can just quickly add, I think, before we're running out of time is let's actually look a little bit on the process timing on customers. So we have a lot of analysis we can do, and let's build up one from scratch because it doesn't take that long. So if we want to show customer performance, because we want to see what's happening to the customers, and we want to also see how many problems are happening to the customers. So we don't have to do anything else in the case. We don't have to do any in the enrichment. We just have to use, we have one called resource versus performance calculator. And in here, we would have the resource we would do here is not the people, but it's the customer itself. We want to show the performance. And here we just say the whole case duration. If you remember, this is the other one we set up. We can take the case duration as our performance. And here we have a lot of different conformance ones. We have all the ones we created. We could do it on credit hold. And let me do that one right now. So we're looking at how long does things take for a customer versus how many issues are there with that customer. And it creates this kind of nice chart for you where you can quickly see things in the red are taking longer. Right? Customer 10 is taking 482 days, whereas some of the better ones over here is taking 346. This axis now shows you the problems that whatever problem you picked. I picked credit hold, right? So there seems to be a lot of credit hold here on customer one. And there seems to be a lot of, this just takes a lot longer. It's not, credit hold is not the problem in this case. You can also see the size of the bubble is the number. And again, you can click on these and now start diving in and seeing the data, right? So hopefully you can do with a very few click. I didn't have to do a lot in here. I click around, and that's what we want. We want you to be able to analyze your data by fairly simple analysis. And we want to guide you on the way that you can hopefully find one of our templates that gets you started. And then after that, you go and change our blocks. So the only other thing that I don't have time to change, but what you can do also, once you've found something of interest, right, you can actually go and you can generate thumbnails for this, just like you do in PowerPoint. You can go and add a thumbnail to this. And after you do that, you can actually export your data directly into PowerPoint. So once you've found your interested things, basically click one button and it generates and downloads a PowerPoint for you that you can then send out to colleagues. So I think that's all I have time for, Daniel. I don't know if we want to stay a couple more minutes, take some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Soren. We are over time, and we do have quite a few questions in the queue. Maybe we'll take one and then follow up on the rest individually. A lot of the questions that we have in the queue and I got as following up on the downloads were around audit logs. So one question was, is there a minimum ideal size for your audit log data set?
So audit log, I mean, is to turn that into a process log, I imagine.
Yeah.
So the things I'm showing is smaller because we let people download them. We don't want to do too big of a log. I mean, very few of our customers has less than 10,000 cases in their logs. I would say it depends on what you're analyzing and the cost of doing each case. So the lower the cost per case, the more cases you want. But typically what we deal with is 10,000, 100,000, or 1,000,000 cases in our logs. It's hard to say if there's an ideal. But if it gets too small, you can't find enough insights. But 10,000, I would say, probably is a cutoff.
Yeah, I remember one company we worked with had one case a year. I think that's too small, Soren?
Yeah, that you probably don't find a lot of insights in one case, right? And the statistically valid is probably not that valid.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Thanks for walking us through that. Everybody will get a follow-up email after we close the session with links to download mindzie Studio for free right from our website, with the data sets that Soren used for our presentation today. And then third, a link to download our quick start guide. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we'll follow up with all the questions that we have in the queue. Thank you.
Spending time.
Yeah, thank you, Soren.